Hello. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we are ready to begin. Today's webinar is eligible for one contact hour. Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society of Nursing is accredited as a provider of nursing continuing professional development from the American Nurses Credentialing Center's Commission on Accreditation. No one in control of the content today have any relevant financial relationships with ineligible companies. To receive contact hours for this NCPD session, participants are required to attend the webinar and log into our learning management system to complete an evaluation. Information on how to access this will be shared at the end of the webinar and will be emailed to all attendees approximately 1 week after the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available via the Sigma repository within a few business days of recording. Following this presentation, if we have time, we'll have a question and answer session. You'll see on your Zoom webinar control panel that you can send a message through the Q&A feature. This is where you can type in any question you'd like to pose to the presenters. Be sure to hit send so the message makes it to us. Please use the Q&A feature for questions and the chat feature to interact with other participants. We'd like to thank our speakers for sharing their expertise with us today. Of note, thoughts and views expressed are that of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect that of Sigma. We are proud to provide this webinar to you as part of a two-part webinar series on research. We do have two presenters today. Our first presenter is Dr. Heighton. She is presently a professor at Liberty University in Virginia, USA. Her primary focus is pediatrics, leadership, advanced practice, and simulation. She is a retired neonatal nurse practitioner with over 45 years of experience. Her experiences included bedside nursing, being an educator, neonatal transport nurse, manager of a nurse practitioner practice, professor, and author. And second, we have Dawn Veltri. She is an active registered nurse with 28 years of experience and a nursing educator for 23 years. She has taught associate degree and bachelor's nursing programs, has served as a lead faculty in fundamentals, and is a current content expert in pediatrics. Currently, she's a candidate for a PhD. She's a Sigma Theta Tau member for 22 years and published as a co-author in 2009 for research comparing low and high fidelity simulation in pediatric nursing education. We're going to turn the presentation over to our presenters.
Good day, everyone. This is Dr. Heighton, and it's my pleasure to be here with you today. So our objectives for this afternoon's webinar are to reflect on experiences related to the research process using a mentor, and to discuss common obstacles encountered during the mentoring process, and to identify important concepts for the mentoring dyad. And we're building upon part one that was presented back in August by Dr. Joseph and Dr. Akers on the complex humans, quality care, and the spirit of inquiry. Essentially, why do we need research? Okay, and just, as we get started from that, I'm doing the faculty reflections, and Dawn is going to be talking about from the student, although it sounds like she's more than a student perspective. Most of us who have done further education, working on our BSNs and working on our doctorate. We've done research all along the journey. But as a student, we kind of had our clinical faculty there holding our hands, telling us what the guidelines were. And we had to, in order to be successful in those degrees, we had to do research. And then you graduate, you get your degrees, and myself, I'm faculty, but I had also been in the clinical arena. It's a little bit different because you're not necessarily mandated to do research, but we all know the importance of research to further our professional standings. Some colleges may require professional growth and documenting that. And also, if you're still in the clinical arena, you're still asking questions about your practice and making sure that you're doing evidence based practice. So, but you kind of, as a faculty member, you kind of, not mandated to do it. So it takes off a little bit of pressure in doing so. But most of us do because, we like to climb that ladder where we, get assistant professor and so on and so on. Just a reminder from part one about what a mentor attributes are. They're knowledgeable. I mean, I know for myself, the mentor that I had too, I was just always amazed how she could just talk about all the research components, and she did it like it was nothing for me. It was very overwhelming. So you want a knowledgeable, you want one who's experienced, you want one who's supportive of you as you're going through this journey. And I noticed one thing that wasn't on this particular slide, but an encourager, someone who encourages you and says, hey, you can do this. You want a mentor to be accessible. You want someone that you can freely approach with, just about anything. You want someone who's a good listener, and you want some who has an inquiring attitude. And then for the mentee, if the mentor wants you to be dependable, if you have agreed to work on a scholarly project together, you want to make sure that you're up to do your part. You want to be motivated. I don't know about the rest, but I get energized when I am investigating something that I'm interested in. You want to be open to feedback, and this is where you learn along the way. I mean, again, a lot of us have already had those basics back, but now, we are becoming the experienced researchers. So feedback is important, willing to learn, and then curious. And I must say that most research that occurs is because somebody has raised a question that you want to pursue more. And so I've had, in my journey, I've had some research opportunities without a mentor, and a lot of these were assignments that I had to do. Now, I got to say, I had some wonderful professors, so it's not that they were not mentoring, but they were not there all the time. They were there for your assignments. And I had opportunities to do several studies that if I'd had a mentor that I would have went on and published some of my findings. But I had worked on a pain tool back, I'm dating myself, but back in the 90s when we started doing more sophisticated pain assessments on our patients. And then I also had the opportunity of doing a study on using video technology to question whether that would improve breastfeeding outcomes. I did not publish either one of those. And I really think that if I had, and of course, my professors at that time encouraged us to do so. But to be honest, I was tired of, studying and all that, and I needed a break. So I took the break. And then I had a mentor, and I have to say, Dr. Rachel Joseph, she is just awesome, and she met all the attributes of a mentor. But since having a mentor, um, I have published several things. Most of them have been with Dr. Joseph, but and these came about um, by some of the these are just some of the mentorship concepts. A lot of it came about with conversation. My mentor and I have a similar backgrounds, neonatology. She was a neonatal nurse. I was the neonatal nurse who became a practitioner. So we would talk about our experiences, and then, as things happened, questions were coming up. And I remember we had a particular conversation about circumcision and how it used to be routine. Just about everybody came in, the males were circumcised, but what we were beginning to see in practice, it seemed to be decreasing. So that kind of initiated one of our research uh, projects that we did, looking at that and looking at, okay, let's look at what the practices really are, not only in the United States, but also internationally. So once we started that conversation, of course, most people are different personalities, so you kind of have to build upon those personalities. So we kind of started organizing, okay, what do we want to research, looking at each of our backgrounds, and kind of came up with an outline of what we wanted to find out. And in general, we just wanted to, what are the recommendations, and then what are people doing? And then, of course, when you're doing a research project, no matter what the topic is, you need to be organized. And, part of that is writing out your plan. How do you plan to progress through this research process? And, we had to work around our schedules, our classes that we were teaching, and of course, you got to have a literature review. And I love how Dr. Joseph and I kind of did this. She did hers, and hers was more on kind of an international approach. And but from our outline, we kind of divided, what topics we were going to be doing the literature research. We all know that that can be very intensive. And then, of course, each of us, as part of our outline, started writing. And, we assigned, nobody just wrote an article. We assigned different principles as we worked through the article. And then important, and of course, we were applying whatever we were finding in the literature to that writing. And then we would meet, and we would, revise, add, until we got it where we wanted it. This process took a while. This is not something you sit down in a couple of days and do. It sometimes takes months. And we actually were just working on another article right now, and we've been working on it for a year. But part of it is because of other responsibilities too. The other part of the process and conversation that took place that's important is, where do you want to submit this journal? Because that kind of guides you as to what type of format they want it to be in. So that's really important to go through. We did do one research project with students. And when my mentor actually, you know, suggested that, and I'm a professor and I work with students, and I'm thinking, students, how can they contribute? Well, that was an awesome learning curve for me, and they contribute a lot. And that, was really nice, getting students engaged, not just, doing it yourself, but the application of working with a team. So there's some of the concepts that I that we worked on together. Barriers of research. I have to tell you, probably one of the biggest of mine was a lack of confidence. I'm a great clinician. I love doing research as far as reading literature reviews and staying, up to date on the latest things. But to actually sit down and write, I did not have that confidence. But my mentor saw that in me, and that encouragement part was so vital in proceeding through the process. And the other thing that I loved about my mentor is she was the expert, and you need the expert. She knew, different theories, concepts, tools that you use. For example, with literature research, there are different tools that you can use to organize your different articles that you're using. And she was able to provide me to make my organization better. And the other probably major barrier was the time commitment. And, we all have, most of us have full time jobs, and we're trying to integrate doing a research project, and it takes time. It's not something you just want to do in a few days. So, those for me were the major barriers. Um, as far as a faculty member, the things that benefited me from this was stimulating growth and productivity. Um, it just, um, I grew in the research process and gave me more confidence, but not just that, it increased my knowledge base on the different things that we were researching, and not just the topics that we were researching, but also the process. And we have a program here. It's an honors program that our students actually do, our undergrads do a research assignment, and they end up doing like and we all love this as students, a 20-page paper, but we were their mentors for that process. And so it helped me going through the process myself. My last one had been like 10 years ago. So it helped me know like some of the latest theories, some of the different frameworks, some of the new terminology that's being used. So I can apply a lot of that now in working with the students that I work with. It decreased faculty stress. I mean, most of us that are in higher learning, they want us to show professional development. And a lot of places want their faculty to publish is kind of a little push. So going through the process with a mentor actually made that a little easier to do. And again, it does support your career development. Um, I've had the opportunity to go from clinical faculty, assistant associate, now full professor, and part of that was, contributing to research and knowledge bases. And then, I mean, it was pretty nice seeing your article in a journal somewhere. Um, so it promoted satisfaction related to doing research. And if you're still, again, I love, I love the academic part of it, but I also love the clinical part of it. And to, verify evidence base, or, um, just I did not initiate anything new, but to see some of the new things in neonatology was also rewarding. So, in summation, some of the benefits of mentoring. Oh, that was my summation. Okay, I'm good. So, Dawn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let's see. There we go. So my name is Dawn Veltri, as shared, and I want to share with you that thank you. It's my honor to be here today. And I will share you up front. I love the results of research. Doing the actual research obviously takes time and takes a lot of effort. So what I wanted to share was, what is mentoring from a student's perspective, and what is a mentee from being actually a mentee. And obviously, the relationship where there's a more experienced individual, the mentor, guiding and supporting a less experienced individual, me, that would be for sure. And then also the purpose. Why do we even do this? For our professional development, it could be for skills itself, our evidence based practice that comes through those, our DNPs, it's phenomenal. Our personal growth, as Dr. Heighton had shared, she liked to be in the clinical and learn those things. And that's what our research does. It does wherever we want it to go. It goes into the clinical, it goes into the classroom, it goes into our practice, and then also how to provide comprehensive research. So, in doing the PhD programs, that I feel has helped me to do that comprehensive research, not just the quickie, let me figure it out and do a quickie thing on my computer and see what the results are, but these are justified and informational. So the reflection of being mentored in the research process, it actually started with me in obtaining my master's. As Dr. Heighton had said that, when you go to higher level education, you have certain aspects of research that you need to do. And mine actually started in obtaining my master's. I was going to Cal State University of Sacramento. And when I got to my master's thesis, I was working with my chair, Dr. Deborah Brady. She was so supportive, so innovative, open minded. I learned so much from her because of her example. She would ask and then help me think, and then she would give the examples and the answers to it. And she guided with that transformational leadership, once again, giving it back, talking about it, and then kind of guiding it. She also had lots of resources when we had to do our statistics. I was like, what? Where do I have no idea where to go for that, right? And she had some resources to follow up with, which was lovely because they explained more of it to us once we got our results. I was actually blessed to be in a program where when we did our master's thesis, they encouraged us to have a partner. So there was another master's student that she and we actually physically worked together in education, and we were going to school at the same time. So it worked out beautifully to do that. When I wanted to figure out what to even do, I'm like, what do I do? I have so many thoughts, so many interests for my master's. I actually was at my work, which was a community college, teaching at a community college, and we had someone come give us a seminar on simulation. It was actually Dr. Patricia Revert from BYU, and she was talking about simulation. And when we had a break, I walked up to her and I said, I don't know what to do. I'm coming up to my thesis. I have no idea. And she shared with me, which I thought was wonderful. She says, you're doing your master's? And I said, yes. And she says, well, you can have an original idea. That's great. She says, but a lot of times your master's theses will build upon a PhD study and expand upon it and add to it. And I went, the bells just went off in my mind when she said that. I went, oh, I can do that. So I was interested in simulation. So that's what my master's thesis ended up being on in 2007, when simulation was just coming up and coming around and the studies were being progressed. And in doing that, we finished our thesis. And after, Dr. Brady says, how about publishing? I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't have a PhD. I don't know what you mean. And she's like, no, no, no. And so she guided my partner and I beautifully how to publish. And she was so exemplary, right? We had questions. We would call her. We would ask her. She had the answers. She found a journal. She says, look, let's try clinical simulation in nursing. So we actually did publish in 2009 in clinical simulation in nursing our master's thesis. I was like shocked. I was like, well, heck yeah, that was great. And then now we fast forward to me doing my PhD. And in my doing my PhD dissertation, I went back to simulation because I teach first semester fundamentals. And I'm like, how do you get critical thinking? I'm like, everybody talks about simulation. And so when I started researching and doing my lit review, I pulled up the NLN Jeffries simulation theory, which I actually had used for my master's thesis. And I'm looking at their 2022 updated second edition book. And lo and behold, my last name's in it. I was like, what? because they had referenced my article from my master's in talking about comparing low fidelity simulation and high fidelity simulation. I just found that out this year. Here we go, so many years later. And I thought, wow, it just opens doors being able to do that research and share it. We always build upon it. And so, in continuing that, in my doing my PhD journey, my mentor, Dr. Rachel Joseph, who Dr. Heighton has referred to from Liberty University, in doing my courses, she had emailed me one day and she said, "How would you like to do the Liberty University Research Week?" I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "I got stuff to do. I got classes to do." And she's like, "No, no, no." And she, once again, she guided me in helping me as my mentor and giving me the resources, guiding me about the lit review, guiding me how to make a poster. And I actually made a poster in 2023 about upskilling in emergencies, the benefits and consequences. It was an integrative literature review. And I didn't expect anything. And all of a sudden, I find out I got third place. I'm like, what? That was amazing to me just because of the help that she shared with me, the mentoring, the clarity, the exampling. It was just wonderful. And then after we did that, humbly, she came to me a few months later and she says, "Do you want to publish it?" I'm like, "What?" Once again, she's challenging me and having me think outside the box. I'm like, "I can?" She's like, "Absolutely." So went through and wrote an article, went through which would be interesting to which articles, which journals, and we were just accepted about 2 months ago to be published in 2025 in the Journal of Christian Nursing on our rapid upskilling of nurses during the pandemic. So I was, once again, it's because of my mentors that helped me to be successful in feeling that I could accomplish and attain these goals about research and about publishing. So there's common obstacles, as we know, when you are the mentee and the mentor. I think some of it is time constraints, as I had shared with you just a few minutes ago. Very busy. We're all busy. No one has more hours in a day than anybody else. We all have 24 hours, and it can be very difficult. We all work 9 times out of 10. We have very busy schedules. We can have insufficient time for our meetings. It's like, well, I can meet you for 10 minutes, but I don't have any more time. And for me, what it was is I'm in California and Dr. Joseph and my current chair, Dr. Kara Shaka, is in Eastern time zone. So we always have to work with that. And especially even when you email to each other talking about times, we have to be very cognizant of saying Pacific Standard Time or Eastern Standard Time. Because if obviously if you mess that up, then you don't get to meet each other and communicate. The communication barriers could be different communication styles. I actually, there are different, as we know, passive, aggressive, assertive, but the ones that I got to experience were the collaborative and transactional. All of my mentors have been phenomenal collaborative, transactional, sharing ideas, working with me. When I spoke, they would be quiet. When they spoke, I would be quiet, having and sharing those ideas. And my favorite saying is, I agree to disagree, right? You don't have to agree with everything and they don't have to agree with everything, but you can agree to disagree. So in also learning how to communicate, should we do it in person? When obviously in California, I was able to do it in person. Should we do it on Zoom? Well, when you do these Zooms and Teams, you have to know how they work, right? I can't get on, I can't get off, I don't know how to do this. So part of that obstacle is even understanding the technology. When we do emails, do you answer it in 24 hours? Do you answer it in 48 hours? Do you answer it on the weekend? That's the communication between you and your mentor of understanding when will those be answered. Same with telephone or texting. That's an option that can be is the texting. Sometimes people don't do that because I know me personally in my teaching, I have a separate account for texting for my students and my community college, but it was not an issue for me as being a mentee. There can be unmet goals or expectations. I could think, oh, I only need to do this much. And then the mentor thought, oh, you need to do this much, or vice versa. Maybe I gave too much and they weren't expecting that much. So, expectations and the delivery. Is it due in a week or should I have a month? Right. So, that's that communication, the unexpected goals or expectations. You need to communicate that. You can have unrealistic expectations from either party. It's like, well, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I can't. I can't do it right now. We have to be able, I can't do it. I don't have that knowledge base or I don't have that time. There's also that difference in work ethics or values and experiences. That can actually, it can be an obstacle because maybe someone is more of a planner, someone is more of a let me share with you everything. And then somebody else could be like, well, I'll just wait to the last minute or I'll figure it out and I'll tell you right before we get ready to do it. You have to be able to have that being in sync together about that. You can also be unrealistic expectations about time, about the flow, about the content itself. There's could be a power imbalance. I think sometimes as students, as mentees, we sometimes are like keep our hat on as the student, even though we are working professionals, because we feel that we don't want to offend somebody, right? And if we offend them, then they won't work with us or they'll shut down. So there really isn't as much of a power imbalance, I think, as a mentee may feel. I think the mentor doesn't really feel that because the ones I've worked with are very open and very supportive. It was me. It was like, well, should I say this? Should I not say this? I know that sometimes there could be a fear of criticism, right? When we get our papers back, we're like, oh, all the red marks or oh, all these comments. But that is an obstacle, but it really needs to be turned around to where it's not an obstacle, to where it's a learning opportunity. And if you have that fear, that inhibits your dialogue with your mentor. So you're ended up stopping yourself if you have that fear. So mine was a fear of meeting timeframes, right? Okay, please have this to me by this time. And I'm like, oh, I have to hurry up and get it done. I'd stay up all night and try to get it done. But I never really actually had a fear of my mentor in meeting that expectation because when I did express it, I would probably cry. I got very emotional, and they're always so supportive. And they're like, no, very encouraging. That was all that I truly felt. But there can be that opportunity of not having that. So, for the successful mentoring dyad between the mentor and the mentee, you have to truly, you have to have that trust. You have to follow through as the mentee. You have to be on time. That's of the essence. Now, if your mentor isn't the same, once again, that same kind of ethic work for you, then you have to communicate it. So, me, I'm very on time. I'm very punctual. I expect things when you say it's going to happen. That's what I'm expecting. So, that would be that establishing that trust. The accessibility, is my mentor going to only answer my emails at this time, or can I call them in a moment? My Dr. Kara Shaka, I would email her at like 10 o'clock my time, Pacific time, not expecting an answer. And all of a sudden I'd get an answer. I'm like, wait, 10 o'clock, what time is that on the East Coast? That's 11, 12, 1 in the morning. And she would email me. So I know that I could have accessibility, but my expectation was I wasn't necessarily going to get that till the next day because of the time zone. But she shone through every time for me and being patient, right? Not being so emotional about this wasn't what we talked about or being negative in the comments. It was more positive. Setting those clear expectations, what to do in the time frames kind of went with that establishing trust and defining the roles and the responsibilities. What is your role? I'm going to write it, you're going to review it. After you review it, I have to review and make the changes. What is that going to work out with? And then once again, as I've continued to share about the effective communication, open, honest, ongoing, it's crucial. It's crucial because if someone feels, the mentee feels that they can't move forward or that nothing they do is correct, it shuts down all the doors and windows. You don't want to do any more. You say, I've had it up to here, I'm done. So for you as the mentee, you have to be open and honest. You have to share your feelings, obviously in a positive manner. I'm feeling very defeated at this time. I need to work with you. I sometimes feel that I'm not making my voice clear enough. Tell me what I can do. And discuss those misunderstandings immediately. Don't think, oh, they don't get it. and then try to do your work and then be frustrated. It needs to be, hey, this is what I got back. Please clarify for me. That's my favorite word, is clarify, right? To help me understand so that we can work together. Another one is that mutual respect, right? Acknowledging each other's experiences. As we know this in nursing, perspectives and boundaries, you don't live in other people's shoes, right? That's just nursing as a basic. But in doing research, we have to trust the process, have to understand that, yes, your mentor is your mentor for a reason. We have to be able to understand that they have experiences that they are going to share with us as a mentee. And I have to be able to accept that. I don't always have to agree with everything. And that's part of that communication. And that's part of that mutual respect, saying, oh, how about this way? Or how about that way? Or that's not what I found. Being positive when we say it and having that empathy, right? They have empathy for us because they've been through it. Maybe we've been through it because we went through a master's and we're getting our DNP now, but having that empathy for each other and that mutual respect. The flexibility and the adaptability, this is nursing's core. It's research, but it's nursing's core. We are always having to be flexible and adaptable, whether it be in clinical, whether it be in teaching, whatever our profession in nursing is, we're always having to do that. And that's going to follow through with our actual research. Things are going to be moving. You start off one thing, and as you talk with your mentor, things change. That's just the way it's going to be. The nursing core of that, sometimes you have to be humbly challenged to go beyond the expectations. So that's what Dr. Joseph does quite a bit with me. When she had said, let's do a poster, she challenged me humbly. She's like, you can do it. And it was attainable. It wasn't something that I couldn't not do, but it stretched me to do it. And me as the mentee, I had to be willing to accept that challenge, to say, you know what? Yes, I want to learn. I'm going to do it, knowing that my mentor, Dr. Joseph, was going to be there with me. Oh, okay, thank you. And Dr. Brady and Dr. Joseph started me with the idea to publish, but they helped me make it attainable. So that was that flexibility and adaptability, but making it attainable. Oops, it won't turn for me. Megan, could you turn that for me, please? Thank you. The concepts, once again, feedback and reflection. It's a continuous constructive feedback, and you have to learn to accept it gracefully. Once again, they're there to help you learn and help you understand that process. And we as a mentee have to be understanding to say, oh, I didn't see it that way. Let me open my eyes. Let me open my mind that way and try to understand it that way. The mentor should give that opportunity of that self-reflection for the mentee. Let me share with you how I'm feeling, Dr. Joseph, because this is what I see. And maybe I'm not seeing it correctly. And Dr. Joseph or Dr. Brady or Dr. Shaka say, no, 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 that's not what it is. Or yes, you're correct. Let's move forward. What can we do about this? Could you please turn that? Thank you. The best practices for those dyads is being consistent. Once again, having regular check-ins. We would plan ahead. I would say, okay, I turned in my paper, and then I would always get the email back from Dr. Shaka, let me know when you want to meet, and I would already set it up. I would say, okay, I want to meet a week from today because I'm going to give myself a week to write it, and I want to meet a week from today. So I knew ahead of time, and so did she. She was always very punctual, very helpful. Having the goals that are attainable, right? Nothing that's far out there. Be revisited and adjust goals, timelines, and contents. That's going to be quite often. Also, make sure that active listening on both ends. Active listening doesn't mean going, It means engaging, talking, sharing. We are planners. Nurses are planners. We kind of have some of our similarity in our personalities is planning ahead and knowing. So make sure that you plan that, you're consistent so that you can attain that goal. Could you please turn, please, Miss Megan? Thank you. So resolving those obstacles, we had already shared about open dialoguing, addressing those concerns as soon as they arise. The mentee should feel safe to talk to the mentor, whether it be that they're emotional about it, and I don't mean in a negative manner, but just overwhelmed, maybe emotional. Maybe there is a negative manner. Maybe I'm upset about something, but we as a mentee have to communicate openly feeling that there was a space provided for feedback and reflection, but we have to give that to our mentors also. They can't be afraid to say something to us and then we're just going to break down and cry or be angry. We work together. This is a research that works together. Having that, sharing those concerns, being respectful, and having that opportunity. I remember one time when I was doing my paper, there was comments that came back that I didn't agree with. And I was always told, remember, this is your paper, right? This is my paper. And so I went back to my mentor and I said, I, I I see your comments and I appreciate that, but I don't think that I agree with that. And we were able to discuss that professionally and respectfully so that we could both, mostly me, learn from it, and then the mentor could see my side of it. You want to make sure that we have that reflection so that we could continue to learn. So, in summary, mentoring is a powerful, powerful tool for personal and professional development. Being a mentee, making sure that we have that open mind, being honest, being transparent, and always having the ability to move forward, which your mentor will always share with us. And I think if we move to the next slide, these are our references, but go ahead and go to the next slide, the next slide. Acknowledgements, I do, as we had shared, acknowledge Dr. Joseph for me, Dr. Brader, Dr. Shaka, and Dr. Anders for this opportunity to present. It's been a gift. So thank you for that opportunity. And I don't know if there's any more slides, and I will turn the time over to Dr. Anders now.
This has been wonderful. Thank you both for sharing all of this great insight. Megan, if we could go to the next slide, please. We're going to open up the forum for some questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature. I do want to bring up a question that was submitted earlier on in the presentation about, do you have any tips or tricks to manage time zone differences? I know you spoke of that a little bit, Dawn, but how would you manage that with a mentor and mentee globally, along with language barriers?
So I honestly don't have the language barriers. If it was me with language barriers, as the hospital always has that AT&T and finding that way to do it to be able to communicate. But the time frame one is I live off of a calendar. I'm sure most of us do, whether it be on my phone or some people still do paper. And knowing my day, and then when it was the time to meet with my mentor that was 3 hours ahead, I obviously had my calendar in front of me so I could look and see. And I just had from of it, we both accepted that maybe they were staying up a little bit later or I was getting up a little bit earlier. Because when you're both working full time, when you're literally in the middle of clinical, you can't leave. So that's looking at your calendar for what day might work. And once again, it depends on your mentee. Does the weekend work? Right? So if you're talking about international, I even have to figure out the day. So is my Saturday their Sunday? Is the and working with those cultural beliefs, right? Some people don't do Sabbaths. Their Sabbath could be Saturday or Sunday. So really, it's looking at the calendar for me, honestly, and figuring out the time zones, and then that's how it's going to have to work together. And if it doesn't work together to meet one-on-one, then you have your emails that you can use.
Yeah, communication is so important, letting people know what your schedule is. I work with some people in Nairobi that work in the hospital, and they're like 6 hours ahead, but we're always able to work something out. And as far as the language issues, there are challenges sometimes, and I found with my colleagues that I've worked with in Nairobi, email is a wonderful resource if we're not sure about something. And that seemed to help clarify any language issues as far, and again, depends on what you're working on. But we were able to use email. I mean, we used Zoom or WhatsApp or whatever, but email seemed to help also.
Yeah, Dr. Heighton, I'm going to kind of coattail off of that. And a lot of our email systems now have built-in translation services.
Yeah.
So if you are using email as your primary correspondence, that is a nice feature because you can use the translation services to make sure that you're understanding what they're saying. Another question that we had submitted to both of you is recommendations in the PhD world about how often should a mentee and mentor meet? Should it be weekly or would it be monthly? What would you recommend in that regard?
I'm going to give that to you, Dawn.
So I think it depends on the person themselves, obviously, because when we did it within our program, there was actual time frames. It would say, turn in this at this time, and we'll reflect back, turn in this at this time. But my personality, I didn't like to wait. And my mentor, Dr. Shaka, she's like very similar to me. So I actually would turn in my papers. She would make a comment, I would turn it in a week later. But sometimes if it didn't work for her schedule, she let me know immediately so that I didn't have that expectation. I personally think that once you're starting to write, it depends on how much you're writing and when you want to get it back. I think within the week to communicate, but like right now that I'm in the middle of my experiment, I don't meet with her weekly. I actually haven't, she tagged into me this week and I haven't emailed her in 3 weeks because in part of our program we have to put up discussion boards, and so she can read how I'm doing in that because we communicate as a class. But I think it needs to see how it works with you as the person doing the PhD and how it works with your mentor. Um, I really have, like I said, have been blessed that my mentors were available all the time. And when they were out of town, they were out of town, and I respected that. But I didn't do expectations of 10 o'clock at night every night. It was once a week, if not once every 2 weeks, because I wanted to stay on target and not wait so long.
Wonderful. Thank you for that explanation. And this is also for both of you. What about making research a priority? As we've mentioned, we're all very busy. We have multiple things going on. So what tips do you have related to ensuring research is a priority when we have so many other competing priorities?
Um, is being intentional and just add it to your calendar that you're going to set aside this day, this time to work on your research. You just have to be intentional about doing it, because if you do it when you feel like it, or working around everything else, you're not going to find time for it. So you have to be intentional about scheduling a time for it, and just be intentional about setting a time.
And I have to agree, if you're talking about when to do research, me in the program, the way my schedule would work is I was able to focus every Friday, Saturday, Sunday. During the week, it wasn't going to work for me because I had clinicals that I was doing 9 hours, 14 hours. I was teaching, and but the priority of researching itself in the bigger picture, of course, always because I teach, I do look at research articles and research itself, evidence-based practice, to be current. But for me personally, to do my research, my days worked out Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But in talking with my peers, they had shared that they would just make sure they would write a paragraph a day, because usually once you start it, you don't just stop. As you know, when you start to write, all of a sudden you look and an hour's gone by, right? But they would try to do it every day. And if they can't do it every day, I couldn't. I knew my schedule didn't allow that. But they would plan it, as Dr. Heighton said, you have to literally put it in your calendar and plan it as if it was a doctor's appointment so that you make the time to do it, because it can just get away from you. People I've seen in my peers, we all say, well, life got in the way, and goodness forbid, that's true. Life continues. Life keeps moving forward. But it's if you want to attain and reach your goal, you have to make that opportunity to research and to do your study because it'll get away from you. It'll get away from you.
Yes, I agree, definitely. I know I personally like to use my calendar, and I do follow the research of time blocking. So whether or not I want to do it, I'll block it in my calendar to ensure that I have writing time set aside, or abstract reviewing time, or whatever the priority is for me at that time for professional development. Would you, either of you, suggest having an additional mentor outside of your supervisory individuals? So Patricia is from the UK, and the PhD students usually have supervisors. Do you recommend a mentor on top of or in addition to the supervisor?
For me, I think it's for me personally, it was difficult to do that. And the reason why I say that is because when we're doing my PhD at Liberty University, we have a committee, we have our chair, we have a committee member, and then we have our methodologist. And for me, it's like you want to make sure that they're all the same. And so if I add another one, and these three are the ones that are supposed to be guiding me, and someone else says something different, now it's not going to coincide. So I didn't have an extra one, but what I did do is I went outside and got a tutor to understand things. So when it became to the data analysis, I got a tutor to help me understand this and that. But as far as guiding me through the research, if it I want to say this humbly, it needs to work with who you have. If it doesn't work with who you have, then you need to reach out and figure out what to do, because then it's going to be a constant not understanding, constant not agreement. So it needs to coincide together. So for me, I didn't feel that I would need another person, because once again, if these three are telling me how to do and are going to approve things, and this one is just adding different ideas and not being cohesive. But if it's cohesive, then it can be a benefit.
The advantage of being faculty is that you don't have a supervisor and you're working with your colleagues.
Okay, thank you so much for all of these great detailed answers. We have time for just a few more questions. So what about research or tips or tricks that you would suggest to somebody that has taken on a mentee and this might be their first time? How can they truly enhance their way of being a mentor if maybe they didn't have somebody to do that for them and now they are the mentor?
Well, I think
Dr. Heighton, you might have accidentally muted yourself again. There you go.
is that better? Thank you.
Yeah.
I think attending like webinars like you're doing today to get people's and on the in August part one is getting information from that, but also I think in the reference we left some good resources that you can read and research a little bit. Um, so I'm not sure I understood all the question, but I think if you are trying to initiate that role, being a mentor is again reading, and there's a lot of literature out there now, and also trying to expand your knowledge by um, you know doing the webinar like you're doing today, Dawn.
I think if you haven't mentored before, there's always a first time, so give yourself some grace, right? And once again, doing that communication. For me, it was really important as the mentee to know the expectations. So if you're mentoring for the first time, I would sit with my mentee and say, okay, what are our expectations? This is what I'm expecting. This is what you're expecting, because there's nothing worse. And it happened to me multiple times in somewhere else that I had no idea. They're like, oh, well, what about this? I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no idea. Oh, well, it was on, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I did not know that. I didn't see it, or you didn't tell me to look forward to that and expect that. And that was very difficult. But if you communicate and have those expectations of what to do, when to do it, being open minded, letting that mentee have ideas and you guide it, I think that that's very, very helpful. Very helpful.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for answering those. I'm going to sneak in one last question and then we'll begin to wrap up here today. What about the mentor-mentee dynamic when it comes to the IRB? Is it, yes, Dawn, I see your face. We, if we have gone through that process, know how challenging that can be at times, but any words of wisdom to share with the group about the IRB approval?
Well, I'll go first. Honestly, I was blessed. In a course, not in my project, but in the course, under my qualitative course with Dr. Joseph, she actually had us go through that. And in our PhD program itself, that's part of our hours. They're called mentoring hours, mentoring hours. And you have to go into the IRB, go through all these modules, learn it, understand it. And Dr. Joseph was my mentor. And she actually had me, when she would go to the IRB and fill out forms, be on Zoom with her and see how she wrote it and see how it went and see how it was. So when I actually went to the IRB, I was good to go. I was like, I've done this, I've seen this, I get this. And I just went boom, 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 boom. It was very smooth because of the hours that I had spent with Dr. Joseph in a course. And now with Dr. Shaka, I had sent it to her to make sure that it was correct. So for me, I was really blessed, but I'm understanding that sometimes it's not as clear. And I actually had great mentors because they advocated for me. I was on a time constraint and they advocated for me with the IRB, and things worked out so beautifully. I was blessed. I was completely blessed.
So again, it's the articles that we have done as faculty, none of them had to go to IRB. I will say when I did my DMP, I had to go to 2 IRBs, uh, and and the project was approved, but I was kind of out alone. I didn't have a mentor that kind of guided me, other than having guidelines that filled out the form. And interesting enough, I had to go to IRB at the hospital where I worked, and with my subjects being pediatrics, it was a little challenging, but it got approved. But I think it would have been better if I could have had a mentor with me on that journey. Um, I definitely think having a mentor, if you have to go to IRB, would be a positive, especially if you guys are on the same, and hopefully you've had that communication that Dawn was describing with her and Dr. Joseph. And as you said, communication is just so important, that you maintain throughout the process.
Wow, this has been truly wonderful, and we definitely appreciate the dialogue and answering all of our participant questions. So thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Mary, for sharing all of this great expertise with us today. Any final words before we close out?
My final word is just do it.
Perfect.
And mine is give yourself grace and find your blessings every day, because research can be overwhelming, but there is a blessing at the end.
Perfect. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing all of this great information with our attendees. Sigma is grateful that you took the time to share with our audience, and we definitely look forward to hearing more from both of you in the future. We hope that you enjoyed this webinar. Of note, Sigma has updated our process, so webinar attendees can now access our learning management system right away using the link that we just put in the chat. Please note that the link on the screen is not clickable, but we have shared the link in the chat for you. If you cannot access this link for any reason, please do not worry. You will also receive an email within 1 week of the webinar that will include the link for you to evaluate the session and receive your Nursing Continuing Professional Development Certificate. We want to thank everyone for spending time with us today. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.